voiceover? Thank you. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 207. Bunch of things on the agenda today. First and foremost, talking about Hleski, how we move that forward, and how we want to approach testing Pectra, given the issues we've seen on the network. Then there were some Fusaka-related topics we didn't quite get to last time around the transaction formatting for the blobs and some EOF and PureDAS testing interactions. If we get through all this, then we should discuss how we want to approach deadlines for like the proposals for Fusaka in addition to what's already there. And then if we get through all of that, some updates on 4.4s. And there were a couple EIPs that wanted to be presented, as well as some discussion around stateless. To kick us off, Perry, do you want to give an overview of your document for Hleski and the outreach that's been happening in the past week or so to figure out the right path forward?
Yeah, so maybe a bit of context. So Hleski was suffering from non-finality for about a little less than 2 weeks. On Monday, we were able to get it to finalize again, and that helps a lot with client stability, nodes being able to sync the network, for map builders being able to test their stuff, and so on. However, a side effect of the long duration of non-finality, as well as the invalid justification, is that we have a lot of slashings as well as exits due to going below the ejection balance. And just as a note, the ejection balance on Hleski is 28 ETH, whereas on mainnet it's 16 ETH. It's another one of these discrepancies we probably will standardize in the future. So as a result, the exit queue on Hleski is about 1 million validators. And the downside of this is that it would take over a year for these validators to fully exit. So while Hleski is still useful for a lot of things, we won't be able to realistically test Spectra exits on it. This is of course limiting for a lot of staking providers, etc., especially because a few of the Pectra features rely on exits. So we had a document outlined. Maybe someone could post it in the chat. If not, I will try to quickly grab it. So we had a document outlined with 4 options. So the 4 options being plan A, which is we just set up a new testnet. So this would be the 3rd line of testnets. None of the options eliminate Hleski because there's still enough to learn from it, especially with having such a full exit queue for so long. But instead, another testnet that we maintain. There was a minor modification to this proposal proposed by Jim. That's essentially, let's not do 5-year testnets anymore. Let's do 3-year testnets. Makes it a bit more predictable. There's plan B, which is use DevNet 6 as a testnet until June. The benefit is that this network is already up and live. Plan C is to set up a shadow fork. So this would happen for a span of, let's say, a month or so until Pectra is live on mainnet. And plan D is using a hacky solution. So a new fork that we introduce on the CL or whatever that empties the exit queue. So these are the 4 options proposed. Maybe I pause here to hear initial feedback, or should I already... Maybe I pause here for initial feedback.
Yeah, and I guess maybe for more context, it seems like the feedback that we've received mostly leans towards option A. There was some minor support for the different ones, but overall, that feels like the one that would make the most people happy. So does anyone have different perspectives on this? Ivan?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so first of all, thanks for the doc. It's really clear. From Lido's side, the best option would be option D, because we already have all our tooling tailored to the existing Hleski deployment. And if we go for option A, which is essentially a new testnet, we would need to probably spend 3 to 4 weeks to redeploy the contracts, all the off-chain tools around it, including oracles, monitoring, and interfaces, and also make sure that we have all the integrations on top of Lido also there. So ideally for us, it would be option D. If we go for option A, we will probably need a little bit more time.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that so the main concern around option D was that we don't really want to implement code paths that mess with the exit queue for just Hleski, and then risk that being triggered on mainnet or having even more health issues on Hleski. Okay, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, across the the landscape, I think that most of the protocols that are built on Hleski that are not core devs are going to prefer D. This is just a hunch. It's the same for Eigen layer protocol. The reason being is that all of the other options require a full deploy of integrations and infrastructure, like not just it's Lido, but it's also Lido plus everything built on top of Lido, and it's EigenLayer and everything built on top of EigenLayer. Again, we prefer D simply because of the expedience and the ability to not, let's say, make mistakes or miss things in our testing in general. I know that there's a philosophical argument to be made here, having worked on a client team, so I just kind of understand the context in which this exists, but D is definitely preferred for us just from the sake of expedience and the fact that even the new testnet solutions or the devnet solutions will still take time to test in general. Like if we're thinking about the mainnet timeline, we have to push back in that sense because we wouldn't be able to test any of this functionality regardless using A through C with a short timeline. So if we're looking at like the expedience of the mainnet release as our timing, and we want to make sure that the large protocols are tested, that's the kind of trade-off that I think will happen. And yeah, D is our approach. And if there's something that we could do on this, like you said, there's hacks, of course. If we can make those hacks kind of, let's say, a rip and replace, I think that would be something worthwhile considering, or just code paths that we can straight up delete.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know if anyone on the CL side can share like what the minimal implementation for D would be. Is there anyone from the CL side who can give an overview? Okay, I guess until someone steps up. Another consideration is if we do option D, do we have this as like a short-term version? So it's kind of a weird variant of option C almost. So instead of having it be a shadow fork, we say that we empty the exit queue. We say that we empty the exit queue, and then we also coordinate launching a new testnet so that we don't consider having this be a long-lived fix.
So the proposal there is that we essentially do D for the short term, get Hleski to a usable testing state, and then shortly after sunset it, and parallelly spin up a new testnet that replaces Hleski longer term. Is that sort of the concrete proposal of A plus D?
Yeah, that's what I would propose. So that, and then to the extent that we can isolate that implementation on the CL side and consider Hleski as deprecated afterwards, we can make sure that like we don't have this custom execute tweak as the as part of like the long-lived testnet.
Is there any CL dev who can maybe enumerate like what this would imply? Like, is this a new custom fork where we just set the validator state to be whatever we want it to be, or is this some config change we're talking about?
Yeah, it would be a hard fork. So basically, we have a really long exit queue, and we just need to like flush it out. On how exactly to do that, we would need more time because there are like a lot of moving pieces to how it's all interrelated.
Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm not really sure if D would really be faster, because if we are talking about setting or like creating a new hard fork, implementing the feature, then we have to test the feature before we run it on Hleski. So I don't know, this sounds like several weeks that it will take anyways until we can do it. So it's not really much maybe faster than doing A and setting up all the dependencies there.
Well, it's like, okay, so A will be quicker for core devs to do, obviously, but the question is how long will modifying the exit queue be for core devs?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It might even take longer, than doing A and setting everything up there.
Yeah. And Flag, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't checked in detail how the implementation would look, but I don't think there's a way to only do it via config change. So you would need a code path like that modifies production code, I guess. So would the idea be that we have a separate like Hleski version of our code, so we don't introduce a regression in like our production code, or?
Couldn't we add a new fork and at that fork change the churn limit to something insanely large?
But you still need like in your condition, you still need, is it this fork, and then you apply the new limit, right? And
Yeah,
you would.
I think in any scenario we need a new fork. But if it's a config value change, that doesn't feel like it needs much other code.
But adding a new fork to a client is really expensive.
But this could live on a separate branch. It doesn't need to ever go back to master or anything.
I think the issue is there's like a high fixed cost, the hard forks on the consensus layer.
So I think if we have just a, go ahead.
Please, no, go ahead and then we'll do Mikhail.
So I think, if we have like a custom build where we maybe even set just the epoch, like how the idea previously was with Peerless, I think then this could be fine, yeah.
Yeah, Mikhail?
We will have to reset the earliest exit epoch in the state. This is a new variable introduced in Electra. So we will have to reset it to whatever epoch we choose for this hard fork. And because simply changing the size of the churn will not help much. Because we already have this parameter. We have this earliest exit epoch somewhere an year after now, and so it will, for any next exit or for any next partial withdrawal that is submitted, this variable will be used as like a basement to compute the exit epoch. So the hard fork would look like resetting this variable. And maybe increasing the churn because we still see some slashings there. So the exit queue will be reduced by slashings anyway. But I have
checked, and I don't see that those slashings are really a big issue, at least now, because yeah, there are a few, maybe a few per epoch. So yeah, might be just resetting this variable in the state be what we want to do if we want to option D.
Got it. Barnabas?
I think the recent slashing were not related to the non-finality, by the way. Those keys were just run by two different people at the same time.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah, please.
how about this? It seems like in any scenario, A is required, a new testnet. So let's just decouple that a bit. Then we already have a proposal for what A could look like, and maybe we can talk about what that is. But we go ahead with setting up a new testnet. And D is something it feels like we don't have enough information on the approach today. So how about we just do a quick breakout room tomorrow, where CL devs can show up. We have some time to think about potential options, and then on that call we decide if D is viable or not. So either D happens or D doesn't happen, but A can happen irrespective.
It seems reasonable to move forward with A. Agreed. It seems like the CL side needs to look a bit more into what it would take for D to happen. Is it realistic to have that tomorrow, say after the EPBS call at 15 UTC, or do people think we need a bit more time to review this and then we should just do the testing call on Monday?
Yeah, and I think D in any option would imply that Hleski is basically sunset once we've gotten its purpose for testing Pectra. So if clients do need to make a hacky fix, if clients do need to make releases, whatever, that it can be done in a branch that they can basically delete once Pectra is live.
I think without enough CL devs on the call, it's going to be very hard to make any kind of decision about the.
Yeah, so that's why I would kind of lean towards the testing call on Monday to at least give people a couple days heads up, especially like the folks in Australia. Unless, I don't know, is there something we gain by deciding tomorrow versus Monday? I assume that setting up the new testnet is some amount of work, and so on the DevOps side, we can prioritize that over the next couple of days.
Yeah, it seems like we're going forward with A anyway, so
yeah,
I think we're unblocked. So yeah, it should be fine to do.
Okay, so then I would lean towards let's ask the CLs to show up on Monday, or to at least articulate their preference around if and how we could do D by Monday, and make a final call about that on the testing call. Okay. And then do you want to walk us, so you posted a doc about how to set up the new testnet, Perry, as well. I think there were two different options there. So do you want to walk us through it?
Yeah, I was fetching the link. So the testnet we want to propose is called Hoodie. The idea is that since it replaces Hleski, it needs to be relatively similar from a testing perspective. So public validator set, we'll use all the mainnet variables that we can. I think there's two options. One is that it's slightly smaller than mainnet, and B is plan A is that it's slightly smaller than mainnet, and plan B is that it's slightly larger / on par with mainnet. And in both options, we can either do stake distributions similar to mainnet, so 32 ETH per validator, or if that's going to be expensive for client teams to run, we do 2048 ETH validators. We have a few ideas on how we can put that in the Genesis state without Pectra Live and still do the transition quickly if we coordinate it at least. And yeah, in either situations, we'd propose that client teams plus ETH Pandops together does something like 67-70% of the validator set. So in the future, it would be relatively easy to coordinate upgrades and so on. Yeah, any thoughts on if people would prefer 2048 ETH or 32 ETH and similar to mainnet?
So I guess there was a comment by Paul in the agenda talking about like the different roles of testnets and what we want from them. I think one question here is like, what is the purpose of Hoodie? Do we want it to be like a performant, like a performance maxing testnet? Do we want it to be just like a stable staging environment for people? Because you could imagine if we want it to be more on the stable side in the place where say Lido and others just can reliably test stuff, we should probably do the lowest, kind of the lowest overhead, which is B. But if we wanted it to be a testnet where, like say, we push the validator count beyond mainnet, then maybe we do things like push the gas limit beyond mainnet as well. We should probably do A, but that raises the question of, okay, should there be somewhere else that we expect projects to test, and that's more of a staging environment for mainnet? Solius?
Yes, so one thing that I raised on this agenda is I'm thinking that we could have two networks, two networks, something like the current Hleski, and then one would be the network that has regular non-finalities. So it's a kind of battlefield network where we could, the client teams could regularly test their clients, and even the community could test their setups, applications, or whatever they use in a close to mainnet type network where there is a battle mode. And then we would have another one, let's say a new network, which is also a large network close to mainnet in terms of validator counter or staked ETH. And that would be dedicated for steady performance, something like like we experience currently on the network, on the mainnet, and hopefully it will proceed like that on the mainnet. So I would like to hear what are opinions on this idea.
Yeah, Ivan, maybe.
Yeah. So generally, for us, having a testnet means that we need to deploy all the off-chain tooling around it, and also have third parties, for example, those running the oracles and the council daemon and other critical off-chain parts of the protocol to be involved, including node operators, and also have things like DBT from both Obel and SSV deployed and run and maintained, which essentially doubles the coordination workload for us and for everyone involved with Lido. So it probably okay like in the short term, but I'm not sure it will be sustainable for us in the long term to have two.
Yeah, so maybe that's where Paul's point about the staging environment makes sense. So the Hoodie network could be smaller than mainnet, but still large, where everyone external can test. So Lido can test here and so on. And the idea is that it's quite stable. We can either repurpose Hleski, or we can have another network that pushes the gas limit, that pushes validator count and so on. And that can purely be client devs and opt in for anyone in the community who prefers that sort of test. But the understanding is this sort of non-finality network will always be breaking, will always be pushing the edge. And if you're interested in testing the edge of your protocol, you can deploy there. But if not, it's up to you.
Yeah, the way I would think about it is almost like Lido's a very weird app because there's a sense in which it's just a contract. It's similar to say Uniswap, but then there's a sense in which it's like much more complicated infrastructure. But I think maybe in like medium term, we need like 3 testnets, one for just vanilla contracts, which Sepolia is fine for, and whatever Sepolia successor is. So if you're just building something that's purely on chain, maybe one for like infrastructure, which is kind of what Hoodie could aim to be, which has like similar parameters to mainnet, but is hopefully relatively stable. I think we probably also need one that's like focused on what core devs want, and this is where things like, say, having like a higher validator count than mainnet, or potentially having like a higher gas limit than mainnet could help, because we see what actually breaks at the protocol level. Would that generally make sense to people? So it's like we have the least stable kind of core dev oriented testnet, which doesn't exist today. One that's more for infra providers, that would be Hoodie, and then one that's purely for just like vanilla apps that don't have many complex dependencies, especially on the validator set. That's Sepolia.
Yeah. Maybe I can start from Lido side. I really like this idea with this multiple testnets. I think it's really good. The only risk I see here is that if something is tested on one of these testnets and then it goes to mainnet and some parties are not present on the testnet. For example, if we test something on the client team testnet and then push it to mainnet bypassing the testnet where we have Lido, then it might like break Lido unintentionally. So then perhaps we should also have pre-release.
Oh, to be clear, yes.
Yeah.
To be clear, every hard fork should go through all of the test nets, but there's the way I would order them, if we had these 3 test nets, like first you go on the core dev test nets. If that one breaks, only client teams are affected. Then assuming that's well, you go on the infra test net, and if that one breaks, well, it's kind of the similar situation that we're in now. So we should really not want to break it. And then the last one is Sepolia, and by there, we should expect absolutely nothing to break. And that's and if you're a new developer coming into the ecosystem, it means that we kind of maybe point you towards Sepolia first, because you don't care about the closed validator set. If you're like a more if you're like, I don't know, like a more infra or like complicated project, then maybe you are testing on Hoodie. But most people don't quite test on the core dev testnet. The one risk I could see there, though, is that if we want to create like a high performance testnet for core devs, how do you actually get transactions? And then if no one's using it, like, and all the blocks are empty, that's perhaps not ideal.
So for this high performance testnet, I would see, and I already discussed that internally in Entermine, and was discussing yesterday with Paritosh, would be great also to consider it to have some very big state. I don't know how to achieve that yet, but would be great to have something which will not start from empty state, but something which will be at least twice bigger than mainnet, so we can test much more edge cases and test everything under bigger load than only increased gas limit or something. That would be also somehow beneficial.
How should we distribute twice the mainnet state? That seems pretty difficult to me.
I think he means just by using tools that increase the state regularly.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well yeah, we can just fuss all
Yeah.
the time. That's fine, I think.
Or using like a shadow fork or something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, so ultimately we'll have something which will allow us to test under those worst conditions, which we always consider with, for example, increasing gas limit, which will start increasing the state size and how it will behave under such conditions, right? So it would be great to have a fuzzing tools which will really pump up to the limits that the testnet and make it at some point bigger for sure than mainnet. And also one thing to consider for such one would be great to maybe as Tim already said, in terms of development and hard fork schedule, it should be always before the other testnets, more official and more stable ones. But maybe it could even, I don't know, to consider push some changes from upcoming hard forks earlier when we will be after a few devnets and already start testing those on bigger chains rather than only on devnets.
Yeah, I think part of the issue has been our testnets did have like different configs from mainnet. So that's something we already said we would stop doing. So Hoodie would just basically have contracts live in the same location, have the same ejection balances, have the same values that mainnet has. So that should also go a long way to make for an easier fork, basically.
Okay. And yeah, we obviously already have a ton of work on our plate, so we probably shouldn't spin up like another testnet just for fun right now. But I think framing Hoodie as the place where we get infra providers to test feels reasonable. If we go that route, do we want to have a smaller than mainnet validator set size? Okay, does anyone disagree with a smaller than mainnet set size? So basically plan A in Perry's document.
And why do you want to make a smaller set? Because after consolidations, it should be easier to run a large number of validators. So I would prefer the similar size of staked ETH and preferably even consolidations that are quite close to mainnet.
So basically, you'd want option B using as many 2048 ETH validators as we can.
Well, not as many because that's a very large number theoretically. I mean, something close to mainnet distribution of validator sets and consolidations.
I think to Dustin's point, we essentially want to keep it as similar to possible as mainnet for now. If there's a lot of consolidations that happen on mainnet, then we can also do so on Hoodie. But if not, then we basically leave it as a mirror of mainnet.
Okay, so that means we launch it with mostly 32 ETH or exclusively 32 ETH validators.
Exactly, and if we notice that there's a lot of consolidations happening on mainnet, we can just proportionally do so on the Hoodie testnet.
Okay, does that seem reasonable to everyone? Yeah, so to the doc, plan B says bigger than mainnet, but I guess here we just say about the same as mainnet and then start with non-consolidated validators, consolidate them over time. Okay, anything else on the testnets? And again, yeah, so this is still what we do about the new network. For Hleski, if people want to review the different options and check in on Monday, that would be ideal. So we may be able to get a quicker turnaround there. But then there's no world, I guess, where we do keep Hleski as the main place for infra providers long term. So once Hoodie is live, applications should start thinking about migrating to this. And maybe this will be after Vectra if we manage to keep Hleski around. Okay, and then Barnabas says, when do we want to launch it? How long the client teams need to integrate a new network? I guess this might depend on what we do for Hleski. So let's maybe discuss that on the testing call Monday, because if teams are going to prioritize doing some weird fix for Hleski, I assume that'll delay. Yeah, that'll delay launching the new network. Unless anyone has a strong opinion now.
Shouldn't be the other way around. Prioritize A, then D.
Well, if we are doing D
Yeah.
to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say if we want to go to mainnet faster, D than A sounds right, correct? Because then we can test the things that need to get tested as far as app and validator set level integrations can go quickly. But A doesn't really get us anywhere. It just means we have to deploy a bunch of new infrastructure, which will delay the timeline.
Yeah, I think D just needs a bit more information. So up until Monday, when client teams are having are all there, there won't really be a location to discuss how D looks. But yeah, I think D, if able to ship fast, would be the fastest way.
Yeah. So okay. So let's figure out the launch timing on Monday when we have a better idea for D. And then last question maybe on Hoodie is, what would be the plan to fork it to Pectra? So I assume we would want to launch it pre-fork and get people upgraded on it, or would we want to do fork at Genesis?
I would go through the upgrade on it and give people maybe a week to deploy contract, whatever, before the upgrade. Yeah, we can basically schedule it at launch. We don't need to do the fork.
Okay.
As in, it would be Denkun Genesis, and then there will be a Pectra fork, and the Pectra fork is shipped along with the network configs.
Yeah.
We can. Yeah, okay. Maybe we can create an issue on GitHub to discuss Genesis validator keys as well as timeline, because I doubt we're going to be able to do that in a short duration today.
Okay.
I wouldn't.
I think that.
Yeah. Honestly, I wouldn't worry about the Genesis validators. That we should just do the same as Hleski. Otherwise, we would spend too much time on deciding whether we want to give or not the ETH to those people. So we already did this whole big list. So I think we can just do the ETH distribution there, and then the Genesis validator set would be just a bit smaller amount of validators. Are there any client teams that would not want to run validator for Hoodie?
Okay. Doesn't seem like it. Okay. So yeah, let's create an issue to at least coordinate on this and then figure out the right timing for the fork. But hopefully we can get this sorted in the next few days. And then have something we can share on Monday or Tuesday with the community.
And maybe for everyone listening who's interested, all the updates will be posted in the Testnets channel on ETH R&D Discord. So coordination about validator set, timing, all of that stuff, you can expect to listen there and get the info.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot to the DevOps team for putting this together so quickly. Next up, so I think it's probably worth having a conversation around what do we want the path to mainnet to be in terms of testing at this point. There's some couple small spec changes as well to review for Pectra, but I think at a higher level, discussing like what do people want to see to be comfortable before A, choosing a mainnet time, and then B, actually seeing the fork deploy on mainnet. Obviously, a lot of the testing kind of got sidetracked because the Hleski issues. There was a minor issue on Sepolia as well around the log parsing. So yeah, I guess from the client team side or testing teams, like, what would you like to see before you feel comfortable scheduling a mainnet block? Barnabas?
I would like to see Hoodie forked without any pain. Then we can probably discuss mainnet.
Okay, so seeing Hoodie fork. Is there anything beyond that people would like to see?
I think I would like to see all of the staking protocols that are sort of waiting for Hoodie now to go live to have their testing done. I don't think that needs to happen before we choose a mainnet date. I think we definitely need to see Hoodie fork without issue before we choose a mainnet date. But from there, I think like within 1 week we can choose a mainnet date, and that mainnet date should be 3 weeks, 4 weeks in the future. And we should just continue having the expectation that people will be testing and preparing throughout that time and be ready if there's like something else that goes wrong to push the mainnet date. But yeah, I think the first thing to do is just fork the new testnet.
Thanks, Enrico.
Yeah, I want to see a big network like Hleski finalizing with a participation more than 95%, so we can check the aggregation and all the votes from validators fully on chain. Because now we were just running small test nets and Hleski, so a big one network with the good participation will be a good confirmation for the attestation stuff.
Ivan?
Yeah, for us, it depends on whether we go with option D or option A, new testnet. So with option D, since we already have all the tooling deployed, once everything is stable and works, we'll need a few weeks, probably 3 to 4 weeks to test everything and to prepare for mainnet. But if we go with option A, like new testnet, then we will need to also redeploy all the tooling, which will probably add perhaps at least a month, maybe a month and a half on our end.
And so, okay, so you're saying if we don't have option D, then there's no way you can have the tooling set up in less than a month and a half post Hoodie launch.
Yeah, because we'll need, essentially there are 4 components. First, it's the contracts that can be done relatively quickly, probably like a week or even less. Then we'll have all the tools for monitoring and alerting that we'll need to test. That's also around a week because we have lots of them. Then we'll have dependencies for off-chain guardians, oracles, and council daemons. It's also can be started in parallel, but it depends on the previously deployed things. So add roughly a week to that as well. And finally, we have node operators running DVT that will need to be integrated with all those other tools. So it's like a waterfall process.
Right.
I think also on our end, we probably would need to rethink how we structure the development going forward, with maybe aiming for a possibility to support more frequent changes in the testnets. Because so far we've been doing it very seldom, maybe once a year or even less seldom. So not everything is automated. And I think if we invest into a more automated process, we would be able to do it faster next time we need to adopt a new testnet. But for now, it's still a lot of manual steps, therefore it takes time.
Got it. POTUS?
Yeah, I just want to mention, want to stress what Enrico said. We really want to measure attestation packing. This has been a pain in the butt for us. For this, we need a stable testnet. But also, I'd like to make sure that the slasher is actually working. When we were expecting to see mass slashings, the slasher was only taking just one index. And it'd be nice to know that the slasher actually can go back, grab the blocks from Hleski's bad fork, and actually slash all attesters together.
Okay. And this is something that, like, yeah, I assume we'll need to do on Hoodie?
Well, no, I mean, I'm worried that validators in Hleski did not get slashed, and all of them at the same time. we have the blocks. These blocks included attestations. The slasher should be able to go back, grab those blocks, and slash everyone. And we do want this on mainnet.
Yeah, we can set something up for you parallelly next week. So different from Hoodie, different from wherever, where we can just do the slashing test.
Oh, no, but I really mean Hleski. In Hleski, we can slash everyone. We already have everything there.
And so what's missing to run? Like what's missing to actually do
I think
this?
the slasher might not be running well. I haven't looked into any slasher, but there's no reason for the slasher not to be able to slash everyone at the same time. I don't think we want to fork into Pectra without having a working slasher.
Wasn't the problem that nobody seemed to be still on the old chain? Or nobody seemed to be running a slasher that was...
No, I think there is a slasher because validators are including slashings. I think just the slasher is not packing all of the aggregating the slashings as per Electra.
Okay, so it's basically...
I don't think there was any recent slashings, by the way.
That's even worse because that probably means that the validators that just restarted, like remove the slashings from the pool, and then there's no broadcasting of the slashings now. But we can discuss this later. But the point I'm trying to make is that there were clear problems with the slasher on Hleski, and we want to make sure that the slashers are working correctly before forking mainnet.
Okay. So, okay, and then Spencer added some ETH testing. So all the tests pass, reviewing tests we have for all the EIPs, adding some missing edge cases, updating the old Hive simulator, Hive engine simulator, and then nice to have line coverage reviews for spec tests on all the clients. I guess as well on the EL side, we can probably test all of the EL only EIPs on Sepolia at this point. Is there a reason why we could not do this? Like, should we be just trying to, make sure all the edge cases are tested live on Sepolia and that there's no consensus issue there?
I don't know. Like we have the test cases as test cases. If they would hit any consensus issues, they would have shown up in the normal test. So I don't we don't really need them on the network. If clients are not running those tests and then have like some open consensus issues, then it's kind of on them, in my opinion.
And then, so the issue we ran into though on Hleski and Sepolia that the configs were different than mainnet. So should we have all the configs on Hoodie be the same as mainnet? Or like...
Yeah, I think we're definitely choosing basically everything the same as mainnet for Hoodie.
Okay. And this includes the deposit contract address?
Yep.
Okay. And how does the deposit contract work on Hoodie? Is it gonna be like some just like vanilla ETH, or will there be a...
Yeah, we just do the vanilla ETH deposit contract, and then we put it in the same location that the mainnet deposit contract exists in.
Okay, great. Okay, so from what I understood here, what we want to see, so we want to see Hoodie fork, we want to see the testnet finalizing, attestations being packed in blocks sufficiently, or I don't know, following the Electra specs. We want to see that the slasher is actually working, and obviously that all the tests pass before we pick an mainnet fork block. Once we see all of that, we would, at least some of us would feel comfortable picking a mainnet fork block. The question is then, can all of the applications that are deployed or on mainnet do proper testing, specifically LSTs. And there's a concern that if we only deploy, Hoodie next week, and fork, say, a week after that, it doesn't give enough time for teams like Lido to actually run through the entire testing cycle. So I think, here there's two options. One is either we do this Hleski custom fork, which we still need to discuss, or we effectively wait until Lido and potentially others have finished their testings, which might delay mainnet deployment, or we find a way to speed up Lido's deployment, or we'll have to move to mainnet or very close to mainnet before there's like a full testing run. And yes, it seems a bit reckless to deploy without not only Lido but other like large staking pools testing. And so I think if that is a hard requirement and that their speed of deploying and testing is also set, the two options are either we have to do the Hleski revival, or we have to effectively just wait a bit longer, and that's probably going to be like 6 to 8 weeks after Hoodie's launch before we can go to mainnet. Which means we'd probably be going to mainnet, call it like early May or something like that, or mid-May. Yeah, Carl?
I personally feel like we're optimizing for the wrong thing here, and that's to get to mainnet as soon as possible, which obviously is great. But I think another very important resource here is client dev time and attention. If we are having to wait for Lido, etc., to deploy things, client devs can be working on upcoming forks and more specifically PeerDAS, which brings much bigger gains further down the line. And like we can pipeline this a little bit, so it achieves some parallelization there and get more to mainnet sooner in the long run. I'm worried that if we have to do this thing where we start having all this bespoke code that needs to now be tested and whatever, the coordination cost is extremely high, and we end up spending a lot of time on something that allows us just to ship one fork a little bit earlier, but I don't think that much by the time we account for all this client dev time and attention.
You're right. So yeah, and so if we just quote like wait, that means that client teams are effectively done with the fork more or less, and then we deploy it on a Hoodie, and after that, we're waiting for app layer or infrastructure providers to test on it. But yeah, ostensibly by that point, hopefully the client teams don't feel like there's more work to do on Pectra.
Yeah, that's pretty much the proposal here. I think in relation to the other thing is POTUS's concerns about the slashes, which I do hear. I mean, it would give us some time to think about and work on that. The second thing is like that's not really fork specific. We can work on that at any time, and we don't need to coordinate to release updates, etc. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure we should worry too much about implementing that before the next upgrade, because that is something we're concerned about and need to fix anyway on separate timelines. But yeah, basically I'm arguing primarily that we shouldn't be doing a hacky fix to try save Hleski to ship something 1 week earlier, but maybe delay PeerDAS by whatever, another 2 months or something.
Yes, or have a bug on mainnet when we actually ship Fusaka. Yeah, the argument is that we should just do A, forget about D, that it's better off to not waste any client time on figuring out D, and that we'd rather wait for infra providers and others to just use the new testnet. And like, yeah, and to be clear, like the quote cost that we pay here is we ostensibly will get Pectra on mainnet later, because there's not as much upfront work that's done for infra providers, but we will not have that bottleneck on client teams as much. And yeah, to Chris's comment, like the infra providers would need to move to the new long-lived testnets, but there's a question of, they probably weren't planning to do this 2 weeks from now. And so it does shift a lot of their timelines. I know it didn't seem like we had sufficient CL devs on the call earlier to make a call about like whether we want to do option D, but if the rough consensus is like we don't want to do it, should we just decide that now so that we can kind of move on and not spend more cycles on it? Or worst case, we can still discuss this on Monday, but yeah.
I think we should just do A and get on with it and do it as quickly as possible and not waste another week debating this.
Yeah, I think at this point it also makes sense. Let's just do A. We can leave D alone. And also just want to bring up the point that Hleski can still be used for almost all testing except exits. And also my document was wrong. Mikhail pointed out that you can also do consolidation testing. The exit epoch in consolidations is not reliant on the exit queue. So that was a mistake in my original document too. Lido, etc. can test consolidations on Hleski as well. They just can't test partial exits and exits.
Okay, so let's move forward with that. Option A. In terms of actually scheduling the fork and the deployment there, it does seem like there's some stuff that client teams want to have in a release, especially on the CL side before we do that. So I would maybe defer to like either Monday or next Thursday to discuss like when CL teams feel like they can have a client release that supports all of the fixes and that they're comfortable using for Hoodie. I don't know, Polis, do you mean shorter than that or longer than that?
Oh no, it was a question for Ivan. Like they seem to need several weeks, as in plural.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh. Okay. So I think regardless of like what we do with option A, like the timelines are kind of somewhat out of CoreDev's hands. We should obviously stress that like the quicker we get everything tested on Hoodie, the quicker we can ship Pectra at the mainnet. But this is kind of the bet that we take. If we take option A, is that we have a clearer path for core devs, but then we are dependent on like the community for some of the testing infra. POTUS?
Yeah, so Ocean from Abol was asking about whether or not we could just replicate the state. Can we just not fork and take the execution state of Hleski and deploy a new testnet already bootstrapped with that execution state so that we could just start with contracts already present? Or if we can't do this with Hleski, can we just talk to these teams so that at Genesis they have already the contracts deployed?
It's not the contract deployment that takes a long time. And we already had this discussion about doing a shadow fork of Hleski. That was option C, if I recall correctly. And
no, but it's not a shadow fork what I want. I just want to bootstrap a whole new DevNet if you want, but have already the contracts of and all of the structure of these people in presence, so that they only need to change the ID, the chain ID in their tooling.
So the problem with this is that the clients do not have the ability to import like multiple gigabytes of Genesis state. Like the Genesis state is usually pretty small, and I don't know if you want to download Geth with like 40 gigabytes of state or something. So what we can do is if we have specific contracts that they want to have in the Genesis block, we can add them just like we add the deposit contract. But they can also just deploy it. Like I think it's quite bad if these large entities cannot spend the money to deploy a bunch of contracts and set up a bunch of infrastructure within a couple of weeks. Like we are not going to go to mainnet before they've tested their stuff. But I also don't think we need to spin up another network or spin up a shadow fork for them to test this and spend like hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. We should just do this network. Everyone can maybe chill for a bit, maybe work on their client. I think there's a lot of client improvements that can be done that this Hleski incident kind of showed. Especially in Geth, we have a bunch of things that we would like to do that we don't have the time for if we are always going after the next hard fork. And so we should just schedule Hoodie and then work on the other stuff. Okay, Roman says no chilling. Fusaka next.
I guess
everything for Fusaka already.
On the topic of like clients improvements, like when do clients have stuff that they want to test for Hoodie Genesis? Because if we are saying we want to see a stable fork on Hoodie, I assume this implies we want to test some stuff that has been found since the Hleski and Sepolia incidents. So should the path be that, like, you know, in 1 or 2 weeks, clients put out a Hoodie release and we schedule a hard fork, you know, maybe like a week or 2 after that? We don't necessarily need like that much time in terms of heads up, because client teams will be running most of the validators, at least at Genesis, and it'll be a pretty small group to coordinate. But should we plan for a client release cycle before the Electra fork on Hoodie? Ahmad?
Yeah, super quickly, I'd just like to point out that just copying the state, whether with the shadow fork or without or with any other mechanism, the EL state that is, does not really just work for a lot of protocols like Rocket Pool, like even L2s will struggle if there's any L2 that is deployed on Hleski, etc. There is a lot of dependency on blocks, call data sometimes, blobs, etc. All of this will not be supported with the shadow fork or copying the EL state. So EL state is copying EL state or the execution state is not a magical solution, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah. So we are starting with a clean state, for Hoodie. And then, so the question is, when we deploy Hoodie, how long do we want before Electra goes live? Do we want full client releases? Or are clients fine going live with whatever they have now on the Hoodie? My sense is if we are going to get node operators and others to actually use this, we should point them towards a specific release. Okay. No strong opinions. Okay, we can and don't need releases out by Genesis. Yes, my question is, do we need releases out by the Electra fork?
Yeah, I think, well, depends on when we schedule the Electra fork, but I think we should have releases out. Like we can start the network early next week and have releases out late next week or early the week after. So I think that would be fine.
Paulus?
I would prefer if these kind of decisions are made by a smaller group, say Parry and company, just like inform us what is the deadline that they are planning the network, and then we need to adjust to have the release by then. We need to start like moving to something like this. Otherwise, we're going to be blocking on a bunch of teams having releases to have these devnets.
What
Okay.
there's a broader question. I don't think it's that intrinsic that for very testing oriented networks run by ultimately relatively few people. This is not thousands and thousands of end user home stakers that are initially being primarily targeted here in terms of bottlenecking any kind of mainnet, Pectra, et cetera. I believe all these clients because they have to for DevNets and the like, but for sure for Nimbus and I know for sure for a couple others can and do today support custom networks. And of course, this is less convenient in a number of ways. I understand the UX, the ergonomics is just not as good. But I would like it to at least be very explicit that there is no intrinsic connection between launching a new network of any sort, Hoodie, anything else, and getting releases out. That this is strictly a convenience feature. Now, it may be a convenience feature we want or we like, but that's a distinction.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm less concerned about launching Hoodie. I'm more concerned about Electra activating on Hoodie, because a bunch of people have said they want to implement some fixes and they want to test those. I assume those fixes relate to Electra to some extent. And so do we want to have enough time for clients to put out a release that has their Electra fixes prior to that fork happening on Hoodie? Yeah, Barnabas?
I think we should set the Electra fork already at Genesis.
At Genesis?
Yes. Not like set the flag, not to be.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay,
Genesis,
not activate
like
at Genesis. Yes.
No,
yes.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe my question is then how long do we need? Like, do we set it Genesis plus 2 weeks, Genesis plus 1 week, Genesis plus 3 weeks?
I think that's detail. We can discuss that later on. But we shouldn't probably have 2 separate releases for Hoodie.
No, okay, I agree. But then clients should be able to run their Electra version before it goes live. I'm happy to defer whether it's a couple days or 10 days to the testing call on Monday. And we can make a final call there. Or actually, do you need this if you're going to launch a network? Are you going to launch a network before this? And do you need that number now? Oh, yeah, Barnabas, is Hoodie going to be live before Monday?
I think we should launch the network on Monday, somewhere during working times, and we should just default to 10 days. So the fork is 2 weeks afterwards on Wednesday. That's
okay. So Pectra would be on the 26th of March.
And the thing is, Lido mentioned that they would need a lot more time to do their deployment, and they would probably want to deploy before Pectra is active.
Is that true? Ivan, does it matter if you deploy before Pectra?
Not necessarily. We can deploy after as well. Well, sorry, we can deploy before Pectra when fast.
Yeah, you have 10 days for like the contracts. I assume you can deploy the contracts in 10 days. But like if some of the infrastructure is only set up after Pectra's gone live, is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Okay, great. So then, yeah, maybe we should just do Genesis plus 10 days.
Yeah, and I think just to keep it a bit simpler for the first week or so, each pandas can also run the keys. So whenever client devs have their machines ready, whatever, we can transfer the mnemonic. and turn off our keys. So that would allow us to hit like aggressive timelines, like the DevNet is up by Monday, basically.
Yeah, POTUS?
Perhaps I'm the only one here, but I think 10 days is a lot. We would rather have more time testing Electra. Our code base is more or less stable. I would rather have that 10 days being a shorter time.
So it already seems like we're going to have a long time after the 10 days if we're waiting, say like a month or so for infra providers. So it kind of feels like doing like, a quarter-ish of the time upfront before Pectra, giving teams some time to ship fixes if they need to isn't too crazy. Yeah, Ivan?
Yeah, I just want to understand, does it mean that we are effectively decided that we go with testing Pectra on the new testnet, or we
Yes.
still have, okay, so that means that option D is kind of off the table, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I
Okay.
think we prefer to wait on, say, you guys and others to test on Hoodie, then have core devs spend a couple weeks trying to do this hacky fix for Hleski, because if core devs are, quote, just waiting and not doing much else, which is kind of a simplification, but they can either work on their code bases, take a vacation, or start working on Fusaka. So we're not like bottlenecked on core devs as much. And then yeah, we can just, like, this means that Pectra will probably ship later on mainnet than if we did option D, but the bottleneck is not the same. And so, ostensibly Fusaka ships earlier on mainnet because we didn't waste those 2 weeks dealing with option D.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. And then if on Monday we have the new testnet, even if it doesn't have Pectra yet, we can already start working with it, deploying our contracts and the tools, so we can hit the ground running and doing some testing as well. And I agree with POTUS. We can also test things on Hleski. We also have a bunch of devnets where we've tested actually almost everything already. The only thing we haven't tested yet is DVT, and that requires us to coordinate with SSV and OBL. So yeah, I guess I'll just coordinate with them so that they also get ready for the Monday's deployment of the new testnet.
Got it. Thank you. Andrew?
So if we start the testnet on Monday, I don't think who'll run the validators, because to set up a validator it will take some time. Is it you spend the DevOps who are going to run the validators initially,
So
or do you expect client?
We can run the validator keys short term, and then as and when client teams spin up the instances, we can transfer the keys to you.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, Beta Ops. Okay, and then there's a question in the chat asking, what does this mean for mainnet dates? So, like, at the very least, we're not going to fork mainnet until 30 days after Hoodie forks successfully. If we have Hoodie fork on the 26th, there's an awkward devs on like the 27th. Imagine that we chose the mainnet date there to be 1 month out. That would be like the last week of April or the first week of May. So I think, like, yes, applications can assume the fork is not going to happen before the last week of April. I do think at that point, though, like, in general, core devs is already a pretty slow process, and we adding more and more like external inputs in terms of setting the dates would mean we never ship. So I think people should assume, like, if the Hoodie fork is successful, there's like around a month before the fork, and they should plan accordingly. Yeah. Ivan, Andrew, I don't know if your hand is still up from previously, or do you have something else to add?
Yeah, I think Andrew was first.
Yeah, I think Andrew might have just had his hand up before. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just wanted to clarify, when we go live on Monday, will it be without Pectra initially, right?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
and we'll
great.
schedule Pectra for 10 days after that. So we go live, say we go live on Monday, March 17th. Pectra will be scheduled to go live on Hoodie on Wednesday, March 26th.
Okay, perfect. That's great for us. Thanks.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so anyone who wants to test pre-Pectra stuff has about 10 days to do it. And then we'll have at least a month after Pectra to on the Hoodie to do further testing. And yeah, in terms of like faucets and whatnot, we can figure this out async and just have some instructions. Yeah. Okay. I think we have a path from here to mainnet. Very last important question, HOODI. Anything else on just like, yeah, the path to mainnet? Okay. Then next step, continuing on our agenda. Andrew, you had a point around error handling for system contracts. What happens if there's like all the gas and it seems like the EIPs are underspecified there?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the difference in the contract on Sequoia got us thinking, and we are considering a PR to define what to do in case a system contract fails. So like maybe, and we should probably specify it. And like by failure, I mean it can run out of gas, and in one of the ifs it says that the gas is 30 million, but I don't think that other ifs mention it. And also it can just fail, so the execution might fail or revert. And I guess one possibility is to, but that can happen, like theoretically it can happen for some transactions or for some system calls, but not others. So maybe we should mark blocks in which system contract calls fail as invalid, right? So, but yeah, so I think we should specify it and test it, and then we'll be because potentially it's a consensus issue, right?
Right. And do we already have tests around these edge cases?
Probably not, but I'd love to add those tests. Well, I mean, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to add them myself, but if somebody adds them, it will be great. But perhaps we also need an if or some clarification to the existing ifs to have the spec so that we are on the same page. But even if it just tests, that's also fine.
I just want to quickly mention here that I asked the testing team to add tests around this also on the day of the Sequoia accident, because I thought it's also kind of an underspecified situation. It's also like we keep coming back to these things like what should happen, for example, if the contract returns an invalid encoding or something. And from the Geth perspective, we think that the correct solution is just to fail the block in this case. So basically, if any system contract fails, then just treat the block as invalid.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so I guess in this case we should codify it. And we noticed that actually there's a bit of an issue because especially for the deposit contract logs, not all of the clients treat it exactly the same way. So for example, as far as I understand in REST maybe, they actually collect the deposit contract logs during the execution of, sorry, one second.
Yeah, so this definitely feels like something we should harmonize across all the different system contracts. I don't know if there's anyone from the testing team on who has more context on this. Otherwise, I would maybe push this conversation to Monday and make sure that we can have a clear solution there by Monday.
Yeah, we still have a Mario's PR up, and the test we have right now assumes that the decoding is hard coded. So I guess, yeah, we want to check if people, or what the consensus on the decoding is, essentially, before updating the tests.
Okay, so let's maybe move this to Monday's call. Does that make sense? And then next up, there was a PR around this that Joachim wanted to move async, so if people can review this as well, that'll help us move forward. I think that was everything on Pectra. Anything else before we spend maybe the last 8 minutes on Fusaka? Okay, so on Fusaka, we have had this PR by Francesco around the wrappers for the blob transactions. I believe we were almost ready to merge it. I don't know if Francesco is on, or I know Felix, you had made a proposal that I think we were likely going to go with.
Yeah, like, I mean, you go with my proposal, it's great. So I don't have anything to add.
Okay, does anyone have a strong opinion on this, or I'm not sure if people have had much time to review, but if it seems like the PR has had a fair bit of reviews, so hopefully we can just go with Felix's proposal and merge this async. If not, we can discuss it next week on the CL call. Okay. And then Alex couldn't make the call, but he said there's a corresponding execution APIs PR that we should merge if we are merging Felix's proposal. So we should just make sure to do this as well. Okay, next up, there were some discussions, this is a few weeks back now, about how we want to test Fusaka and if and how we should be able to disable EOF to allow for like pure DAS testing. I don't know if anyone has an update on this.
We haven't pushed it out to the clients yet, but it's a fairly simple thing to make sure that EOF contracts don't get in. You just put a flag in the creation contract or what's going to be happening with the TX, not deploying the TX deployment contract, and then EOF won't enter the system. So there's a very well-positioned place to bottleneck and keep EOF out from running. And we would use the same client code and still have the same stable code out there. And then when EOF is ready, we just put the contracts back in place, or everyone turns off their flag. So this is something that's very achievable if it's valuable. So we just need to get the clients to implement it as part of DevNet 1 if that's what's needed.
Does anyone else have thoughts or opinions on this? If not, is there a specific, do you have a specific description of this that people can look at, Dano?
Not yet. We've been working on DevNet 1 features, finalizing those. So this week, I'll make sure it's part of this next Wednesday call.
Okay, sounds good. And yeah, I think it's fine to table this for a couple weeks now, given everything we have to do. Okay, and then next up, so we had a few weeks ago also agreed to try and finalize the Fusaka scope by the time Pectra goes live. So we had all these dates that now will obviously push back. So I think I had two small questions. One, we set all those dates for like proposals and teams sharing their preferences on like Thursdays. First of all, I think we should move them all to Mondays of like whatever week we choose, so that it gives people a few days to actually review things before all core devs. Second of all, like based on our current plans now, when is like a reasonable time to have like a deadline for people to propose EIPs for the fork and for teams to share their views on what should go in or out? So we'll have what is hopefully the last testnet fork on March 26th. If we keep the same schedule, it means that 3 days ago was the deadline for new proposals for Fusaka. And that a week from now or 10 days from now would be when we want to have client teams put out their like preferences for the fork. My sense is teams have been pretty focused on Hleski, so I don't want to like add another thing on people's plate for the next week. So I would at least wait until I think the Hoodie Pectra fork before teams have to like put out their preferences. But I don't know, is that too long? Do people already know what they want? Yeah, Justin?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's actually good for us, waiting for what you just suggested. We have positions that we're still refining. We wanted to hit ETH Denver and talk to some folks, then have a couple of conversations before committing to anything. So I think that timing works great for us.
Okay, so if we did this, what I would say then is March 31st would be the deadline for client teams to submit their proposals, which is a week or a bit less than a week after the Hoodie fork. Obviously, if everything goes poorly on Hoodie, we can revisit. And then what I would do is then push 2 weeks, or maybe like have March 24th to be the deadline for people to propose new EIPs, which is about 10 days from now. And yeah, this will give teams a bit over a week this will give teams exactly a week to like finalize their views after that. So to recap, it would be March 24 deadline for EIPs to be proposed by anyone, March 31st deadlines for teams to share their views, and then hopefully this means on the awkward devs of like April 3rd and 10th, we're able to finalize the scope. Okay, any concerns with this? And actually, April 10th was also our deadline to finalize the scope. Okay, and then so on the topic of EIPs being presented, so obviously we've skipped a bunch of weeks. I think we should find a way to do this better async. I don't know that we can actually get like 10, 20 different EIPs to all come and present. So I think for people who want to actually propose an EIP to the fork, the way to do this is by opening a PR to the Meta EIP, which is EIP 7607. And so client devs would have to review all of those. We can try, I think, on the next All-Core Devs to have some of the EIP presentations, but I also would like to move more of this async. And I think one, breakout calls are another option for this. William also had shared slides on the previous All-Core Devs agenda, which people could review. So at the very least, we should try and have PRs for those proposals to the Meta EIP. We'll try to get as many presentations as we can, but realistically, we may not have time to get through all of them, and I think it's better to move some of this more async. And if client teams feel like there is an EIP that needs like a deeper dive and that we actually want to bring up on the call, we can prioritize that. But I would prefer to move more of this async. And I know we're at sorry, one last thing before we move on from this. So I think when client teams also propose what they want in, we now have this new status, declined for inclusion, things we don't want in this current fork. So if there are things that teams feel strongly should not be in, I think it's also worth trying to signal this, because if there is an EIP that every single client team feels we should not be spending time talking about, then we can just avoid this. DFI means not now. So I don't think we can make a commitment beyond like the next fork. So DFI means we don't think this should go in the next fork. So if there is an EIP that people feel like, you know, it's been proposed and they really don't think should go in the next fork, I think it's fine to include that. I think it's also fine to say that, you know, the priority for the next fork is already PeerDAS and EOF. Those are huge. And if client teams feel like, you know, there's 7 different EIPs that they've never heard of and they don't have time to actually look into very deeply, and that they don't feel like, you know, doing like that, they feel like the odds of doing more than what we've already committed to are low, and they can just DFI those. Like, I don't think it should be taken as this EIP is bad or there's something wrong with it, but just this is not something we want to prioritize for the next fork. And so hopefully having the signal helps us move a bit quicker in terms of like not spending time on stuff that people think is just not a priority for now. And okay, I know we're already at time, but there is, I believe, a portal workshop going on this week, and there was a RPC request or RPC change by Light Client. So I don't know if Light Client, you want to say something real quick about it before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm not in at the portal meetup, but I think there is kind of agreement that they wanted to have this error in the RPC to return when someone is requesting, you know, any kind of block data that has been pruned due to the history expiry. So this is basically just that error, the code and the message that should be returned when those circumstances happen.
Right.
Yeah, I can give more context. I can give a little bit more context. Yep. We want to add this error because the RPC API has a defined signal for like saying that something doesn't exist, but it is a distinct case from basically the history expiry, because we don't want the usually the expectation is that the data will exist all the way back to the genesis. So we want to add this special condition that if a client is trying to access a block data that isn't, we know basically the client cannot make a good statement about, then we want to signal it to the caller.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yeah, so I guess if people want to review this in the next week or two, and then we can merge it. Yeah, we can bike shed the actual error code.
Yeah, we're pretty set on this code though. Like we've already kind of agreed with more people.
Okay, so the code is set. Okay, great. So we'll let people review that, and then hopefully we can get it merged in the next few days. Again, yeah, apologies we couldn't get to. There were 2 EIPs people wanted to discuss today, and then Kev had some stuff around stateless clients for MPTs. Hopefully next call we have time for it. The EIPs, people should review it async. And then Kev, I don't know if you're still on, but if so, is there somewhere people can discuss the stateless MPT stuff async? Okay, I will ask Kev to share something on the Discord about the stateless conversation. But yeah, thanks everyone. I know there's a lot going on right now. Appreciate people working to get this this fork wrapped up. Yeah, hopefully we manage to do this in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, that's all for today. Talk to you soon.
Bye.